March is coming up quick, and every month we put together the games you got to look out for that are coming out in that month. Hi folks, it's Falcon. Today on GameRanx, the top 10 new games of March 2023. Starting out with number 10, Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. So if you're looking for a remaster of a pretty classic survival horror game that, because it was a survival horror game on Wii, did not get the wide release that it deserved, look no further than this. This is one of those games that didn't do that great commercially when it came out, but is remembered pretty fondly and also is definitely on, originally speaking, very outdated hardware that not a lot of people are really using anymore. It's interesting because basically you're armed with a camera and taking photos of ghosts harms them. They really do not like being photographed. There's various types of damage you can deal, but if you really want to get them, you take a picture of them while they're attacking, and that is what is known as a fatal frame. You manage that, you got them. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on, obviously. That's kind of the gameplay convention of the series. This one takes place in the 1980s. It's got a fairly complex story involving serial killers and kidnappings and stuff like that. It's a pretty damn good game. Honestly, I remember this one when it originally came out, and I remember going, this isn't going to get a lot of attention, but this is a good game. It's actually, like, I think the third in the series, if I remember right. And because the series kind of didn't massively evolve its gameplay, critics were a little harsher than I think they needed to be, because there's really no other series like Fatal Frame. I'm sorry that by the third one, the unique gameplay hasn't turned into unique gameplay times 10, but it's a good game. Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is landing on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, PC, and Nintendo Switch on March 9th. At number 9 is the Great War Western Front, an RTS based in the First World War era. As you might guess, you get to choose whether to play as the Central Powers or the Allied Powers. So far, sounds like a pretty standard World War I RTS. But I'll also say there has been nowhere near enough of that. Like, we have various things like Star Wars Empire at War, which is actually what the developer Petroglyph Games is known for. But the days of the good Command and Conquers are long gone. Speaking of which, Petroglyph also remastered Command and Conquer. I don't know if you're getting what I'm getting at, but what I'm saying is there really just isn't enough like the old school greats. The Great War Western Front, while it does add some things, like you see various unlocks and different types of negotiations for ceasefire, etc. There's potential for different things here, but it really looks like kind of a throwback in the best way to me, and I'm definitely going to give this one some of my time. I miss those games so much. I was such a huge Command & Conquer and Command & Conquer Red Alert player, and it's not like Petroglyph has said, this is just going to be Command & Conquer. It looks more like that kind of RTS than some of the things that we see nowadays. Not to take a dump on today's RTS games. There's certainly a lot of very good ones, but I just have a hankering for this type, you know? The Great War Western Front is landing on PC on March 30th. At number 8 is The Last of Us Part 1 PC port. I know a lot of us have been waiting for this. Obviously, the PS5 version of The Last of Us Part 1 is the definitive best-looking version of it, period. It's a game that's been remastered multiple times in the 10 years it's existed because it was developed for the PlayStation 3. It was one of the last PS3 games, and it's such a good game with such a deep, engaging story. It has deserved to look good. And when they made The Last of Us Part 2, they decided to go back and make Last of Us Part 1 look as good and incorporate some of the gameplay stuff. It was a good idea, except for obviously it's PS5 exclusive because it's a PlayStation game. Well, seeing it on the PC is probably making a lot of people happy. Me particularly, I love this game. I love the idea of being able to play the damn thing on my computer easily without any nonsense. I just install it and play it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's thinking that. Last of Us Part 1 lands on PC March 28th. At number 7 is Deceive Inc., a multiplayer spy game. Not something we see a whole lot of. So basically, this is a game where you're using stealth and disguise, specifically disguise, to sneak in, complete an objective, and get out. However, you're not the only one doing it. Deceive Inc. apparently has a bunch of spies on its payroll, and all of them are competing to finish the mission. At least that is the conceit. It is ultimately just an excuse to give you some pretty innovative looking gameplay, albeit with a little bit of a familiar aesthetic. It kind of looks like Fortnite in a lot of ways. A lot more indoor stuff though. This is one that I wasn't expecting to be interested in, although over the last couple of months I've seen stuff that's really been hooking me, and it's one I really want to try out. It's $20 up front, which is kind of interesting for what looks like it will eventually be a free-to-play game, although I could see them using this to raise money to expand it into something bigger, which I would like. Honestly, if it catches on and there's a nice big player base, I could see this being just a hell of a cool game to get on, pull off some cool heists, and get into some crazy shootouts. Deceive Inc. is coming to the PS5, the Xbox Series, and PC on March 21st. At number 6 is Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. This is very different than the other Bayonetta games. It's more of an adventure game. It borrows from Brothers in that you play as two different characters, despite it being a single-player game, using two different Joy-Cons. It's isometric, borrows a lot from Zelda in that way, borrows a lot from platforming, and honestly looks like an experience that synthesizes a few different things. Lots of puzzle solving. There is combat, looks kind of hack and slashy, plus magic, and it's about Bayonetta becoming Bayonetta. It is decidedly significantly less racy than the other Bayonetta games in that it's very cutesy. We've got a cel-shaded look, very fantasy-oriented, obviously not aimed at adults specifically, although I'm sure fans of the rest of the series will also enjoy this game as well. Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon comes to the Nintendo Switch on the 17th. And number 5 is MLB The Show 23, the latest in the formerly PlayStation exclusive baseball series. A few years ago, they started making them for everything. It's still Sony made. I guess they just figured they could make a lot more money with a baseball game going multi-platform. Not a bad idea either. Last year, they kind of got lambasted for being a little bit repetitive from the previous year's gameplay. They'd added like one mode, but nothing major. This year, they've gone for something I think that's a direct response to that. They've added in a mode with what they're calling storylines, a new game experience, which brings in a historical narrative, which is an interesting idea. At the moment, they're on season 1 of a focus on the Negro Leagues, and there's a focus on 8 major players from those times, including probably most importantly Jackie Robinson, one of the most legendary baseball players of all time. And it'll be really interesting to see exactly how that plays out, because I could see that working out either to be really good or really bad, and nothing in between. MLB The Show 23 is out on the Xboxes, the PlayStations, and Nintendo Switch March 28th. At number 4 is WWE 2K23, the next in the series that honestly, like, last year's was pretty damn good. My Faction is returning from 2K22, and overall, 2K22 had kind of like the best wrestling, grappling, like, stuff that you could imagine. It's not simulation stuff, obviously. That would maybe be not the funnest game of all time, and WWE is not in real life even that realistic. It's heightened over the top stuff, so it's good that it's not necessarily as arcadey as No Mercy back in the day when they called it WWF on the Nintendo 64. But this year they've brought that gameplay along with the return of My Faction, which I thought was pretty good. There's also War Games, which has never been in a WWE game before. Showcase is back with John Cena. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going into this game, and I don't know if I'm necessarily expecting any kind of innovation per se, but this looks like pretty much the best package of WWE 2K wrestling. I have my hopes. I mean, unless they do something like they did a few years ago and just totally screw everything up. I don't think they're gonna. I'll be playing this one when it hits on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, and PC on March 17th. And number 3 is Resident Evil 4, probably one of the most anticipated remakes coming out of the whole Resident Evil remake series. This is basically where Resident Evil changed from third-person tank controls to basically what it is in the remake of Resident Evil 2 and 3. Not completely. I mean, it was a GameCube/Wii game. There were some notable differences from the more recent remakes, but the third-person kind of survival horror conventions were established in this game, and it really does feel like something that goes really well with 2 and 3's remakes. I'm curious if we're ever going to get a Resident Evil 1 remake in this vein, because in truth, I think that these remakes have basically defined what Resident Evil is. Like, there's a reason that they added in the third-person mode into Resident Evil Village. It's because the way that these games play is just great. It takes everything that Resident Evil 4 kind of innovated and makes it smooth and work well, and I'm really excited to play Resident Evil 4 that way. There's also a lot of new stuff in it. The village is a little bigger. I'm sure there'll be some randomized stuff in it to keep you on your toes. I'm really excited. Resident Evil 4 Remake is landing on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, and PC March 24th. And number 2 is Crime Boss Rockay City. This is one of those games where if it's what I think it is, it has a pretty good chance of being good. But also, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think the marketing has done a very good job of telling people what the game is. They've focused a lot of their marketing on the bigger names that are involved in the cast, and I get that completely. I understand that. But you really have to delve into some of the gameplay videos to get it. It's a first-person shooter. It's a heist game. There are a lot of people that are quick to compare it to the Payday games, but it kind of seems like somewhere between that and GTA, if GTA was a first-person shooter. And if that's what it is, I'm excited for it. Like, I would really like that to be a good game with, like, a killer cast in the way that it had. Like, there's so many cool people in the cast. Danny Glover's in the friggin' cast. As far as I can tell, it's not an open world game, and that's really interesting given what it is. I say the Grand Theft Auto part because it kind of looks like it wants to have a Grand Theft Auto style story with turf wars and all that, but I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, and that could be really exciting or really terrible. Crime Boss Rockay City's landing on PC March 28th. We'll see console versions later in the year. And finally at number 1 is Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which comes to us from Team Ninja. It's an action RPG, but I wouldn't call it something that looks like Neo or Dark Souls. Instead, it looks a little bit more varied in the types of gameplay it intends to bring along. And also, hey, you can jump in it. I don't know, it's a really cool looking game though. The visuals are amazing. It takes place during the Three Kingdoms period of China, except for obviously it's a little more dark fantasy oriented with all the, dragons and stuff. I don't know of any historical demons, but this is one of those games that just looks fantastic. I really can't wait to play this one. Wolong Fallen Dynasty is coming to us on the PlayStations, the Xboxes, and PC on March 3rd.
And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.